Ave, true to Christ. Hey everybody, this is Catholic Trash Talk, and today we're going to be talking about the Radical Like Jesus challenges. Same thing as always, guys. There's a playlist that you can go to. You can check out these challenges. Radical Like Jesus challenges is the playlist. And basically, the point is every day I give you guys a different challenge to do based on the 21 Radical Like Jesus challenges that Greg Steer puts forth in his book. I want to be able to point out the dangers of Protestantism in this. And then I also want to call out my old Protestant self in this. And this was actually the last one that I drew something for. So the rest of them are just going to be basically my own take. And then after I get done with this series, I'm actually going to be making a series on a book that one of my commenters recommended, Credo, by Athanasius something. But I'll get the video started and I'll tell you what the book name is. So the book is by Bishop Athanasius Schneider, who looks like... Who is Bishop Athanasius Schneider? So he is a Catholic prelate in Kakistan. Interesting. Anyways, we will get right to the video.
The Bible simply states, and they crucified him, speaking of Jesus and his suffering. But that really doesn't capture the depth of the pain that Jesus went through. I want you to think about this. Jesus was arrested illegally. He went through three civil trials, three religious trials, stayed up all night. He was blindfolded. He was beaten. Then he was given over to the Roman soldiers that literally tore the beard from his face. They beat him so badly that Isaiah says he didn't even look human. They stripped him of his clothes. They took a cat of nine tails, a rod with 9 strands of leather, and broken pieces of pottery and glass and razors and nails. They flung it into his back again and again and again, his back, his buttock, his legs, nothing but bloody ribbons of flesh and muscle and sinew. And they put a crown of thorns on his head, 2 to 3 inches, Jerusalem thorns. They pounded it into his skull. They beat his face with that. He must have looked, as Isaiah says, non-human. He was so beaten so badly. And then he was crucified. I want you to think about the suffering Jesus went through. Unimaginable. And then that unimaginable suffering of feeling the wrath of God poured out on him for the sins of humanity. Sins he didn't commit, he suffered for. And I want you to think about suffering, not just of Jesus, but the suffering that you have gone through in your life. And I believe, according to 1 Peter chapter 4, suffering, it says, he who suffers is done with sin. In other words, suffering is a sanctifying agent. And I want you to do this for this challenge. I want you to go back, and I want you to write a suffering account. Write down the 5 biggest trials or areas of suffering you've had in your life and how God used each of them to help purify you from sin and to draw you closer to him. We all have suffering in our lives. It pales in comparison to what Jesus went through, but God uses that suffering. So write that suffering account for this challenge and how God has used it in a powerful way in your life.
So I actually agree with this one. I think that it's really important. Suffering produces perseverance, hope, and on and on and on. But we got to realize that the sufferings and trials we go through, they make us who we are. And this is why I stand by that you can't regret anything that's happened to you. And some of you will have a hard time to accept that because you may have gone through terrible things like rape, or you may have lost an arm, or you may have had family members killed in front of you. But the thing that we got to realize is that regardless of what's happened to us, because I get it, I've been through trauma, I've had disastrous things happen, I have PTSD, CPTSD, and I have to be reminded of my trauma every day if I don't keep my mental health in check. And it's thanks to the grace of God that I'm able to live a normal life and to at least have some comfort from the flashbacks that I have to experience every day. But we can't turn ourselves into a victim, and we can't have these things be why we can't do things and create these narratives in our head of why we can't do these things. Like, for example, my mom has a really negative disposition that she's going to have anxiety and depression for the rest of her life. You know, she's a Wiccan, so she doesn't follow the faith. But she's set on her ways of she's always going to have depression for the rest of her life, and she's never going to be cured. And that's a depressing way to live. And, it's harder for her to get past her anxiety because of that. But if we let that control us, it becomes our master. It prevents us from being happy. And so if we are able to see the suffering we've gone through and see why God has used that, or how God has used that to better our lives or to create a better situation, it helps us practice reflection, mindfulness. It helps us recontextualize the things and see the big picture. Because, like, for example, you could see, like, my atheism and my difficulties I've had with relationships, and how I've constantly had different abusive relationships, different relationships of women using me or hurting me or doing different things to me. But, you got to realize that in each of those relationships, I learned something about the human condition, and I learned something in a way to love people on a deeper way, to the point where the last couple of relationships I had, they were with mothers who had, single mothers who had had hard lives, and they had a hard time trusting people, and they had a lot of anger and forgiveness issues, and I was able to help them through that because not only in my experience as being a Christian, but in my experience of seeing the human condition and seeing how far people can fall. And that has, these trials and tribulations have had, allowed me to become stronger. But again, the idea is 5 trials that you've been through. You need to write what happened, how they affected you, what they did for you, how God used them to better you, and then finally, how you're going to live moving forward. And that is going to allow you to see everything in a better light and to be strengthened. So, my Protestant self had a little bit of a different idea on this challenge. And the idea is you gotta go through the different levels. So first you gotta be able to answer, what are the 5 trials? Second, you have to understand why the trials you went through were a trial. Third, how did God sanctify you? Fourth, where will you go now that you've overcome this trial? And fifth level, what will you do to get to that point of overcoming the trial if you're still suffering from it? I don't really like that, because we're focusing too much on pathologizing. We're focusing too much on solving your problem. We're focused too much on the problem itself and not about who you are, how you can be better, and how you can reflect on what's happened. So this will be the last time I will be grilling my Protestant self, because I didn't have any others. So the rest of the videos are just going to be, talking about the challenges. So anyways, feel free to bully me in the comments, guys. Thank you for commenting as always. I hope you guys have a blessed day. Peace be with you, and bye.